The NSE All-Share Index gained just under 1% on Friday to push the market up by just over 0.5% for a volatile week. Robert Omotunde, investment researcher at Afrinvest, joins me now to discuss the outlook for stocks and, of course, some of the other news flow impacting investing here. Robert, thank you so much for coming in today. We must start with the inflation numbers, 9.3%. I think a lot of people already expected that number should go up, and it definitely did. And I think some people are even suggesting that we may see double digits at some point. For you, what was the biggest takeaway from the numbers we saw? Okay,
for the inflation figure that we're seeing right now, like you said, market is not too surprised to see this figure. In fact, market had expected it for July, but inflation, of course, firmed at 9.2. So what we are seeing now, it's a backdrop of the various macroeconomic challenges facing the economy. We recall that the ban of 41 items, it was meant to have its own impact on the numbers, although MBS is attributing this surge to some rise in the prices of certain staple like bread and the likes. It is expected that the high inflation that we're witnessing right now may be sustained for some periods before we begin to see some moderation.
I guess it puts the MPC in a very difficult position because on one hand, we are seeing growth slow significantly to 2.3%, and then on the flip side, we're seeing inflation tick up. So what are your broad expectations? How do you think the MPC is likely to deal with this challenge?
It's not so interesting that what we are witnessing now, it's more like a period of stagflation for the economy. Like you rightly said, GDP growth is quite low, and now coupled with high inflation rate, that is too bad for the economy. However, I think the MPC is going to rightly focus on the gains that they've witnessed in terms of stabilizing FX prices at the interbank, whilst there are certain reasons why people think the exchange rate is not appropriately priced at the moment. I'm of the view that the CBN would not likely take any decision that would likely affect the FX.
So the focus firmly on the exchange rate.
Will be on the exchange rate and not necessarily what the inflation figure is saying right now.
But let's move back to the markets. Like I mentioned, really volatile week last week. No thanks to the exclusion of Nigeria from the JP Morgan index. What do you expect this week? Do you think a lot more stability, especially now that we're beginning to hear some positive news around the cabinet and what we are likely to see from that?
Well, what we are going to expect this week, of course, if you follow the trend, after the exclusion of the news by JP Morgan to exclude Nigeria from its bond indices, we witnessed that market reacted initially. But what we are seeing now is more like the investors are already, digesting the news, and they're trying to see how worse can it get. And of course, that's why we saw a rebound on Thursday and on Friday. And as I speak, market is already on a positive note. Of course, the news about the news flow on the cabinet is a major one that we believe in the medium to long term will catalyze the market into positivity.
In fact, many are saying that is perhaps the only catalyst left. Because when you look at the macro story, not very positive. Everyone's still expecting that many people rather are expecting that we need to still tinker with the exchange rate. So your thoughts about the importance of the cabinet right now?
Well, the importance of the cabinet cannot be overemphasized, given that a lot of foreign investors and locals believe that when you have the competent, the right kind of people, in government making policies for the economy, we expect that this will, have, positive impact. That said, we also believe that the cabinet, the news about the cabinet alone is not what the market needs to, catalyze it into the positive trend. There are other factors that investors may be looking at. Yes, the fact that whilst we're talking about the cabinet, of course, they are going to be there to make certain policies, that is expected to be positive for the economy. But from the monetary policy angle, there is a need for the market to begin to see some form of reinstatement of confidence, if I can put it that way, in terms of monetary policy regulations. And this is another factor, of course, that we have, attract particularly the foreign investor into this market.
So finally, what should we be buying, given all the uncertainty around the market, the macro story, the cabinet, how do you approach the stock market right now?
It's so interesting that no matter how bad the market is doing, there's always an opportunity. So what we are seeing now, it's our sentiment is tilted more towards the financial service. The banking stocks. You could see that they were able to weather the storm of all the macroeconomic challenges. Of course, we saw their full year results for 2014 was quite positive, and of course, H1 was also good. It's unlike what we witnessed for the likes of consumer goods. But of course, we're also positive about the industrial goods sector. Reason being that by the time the cabinet is put in place and this government is ready to set the ball rolling, we expect that they will make certain, investment, particularly in the capital expenditure, so to speak. And this is expected to also bode well for the economy.
Any particular names that you like right now that investors should, that just look too cheap to ignore for you?
Well, in the banking space, it's quite interesting that what we are seeing, if you analyze some of the banks and you price them on the basis of their price to book, it presents a lot of opportunity. Zenith Bank, for example, it's a stock that you may want to consider in that space. As I speak, Zenith is almost trading, at par with its book value per share. So meaning that if you check
that's
that,
a no-brainer, really.
Well, so it's one of the stocks that you may want to consider in the in the banking space. In the industrial goods space, given the strategic position that Dangsem occupies and the interesting numbers that we have seen recently, Dangsem may be a stock that investors want to have in their portfolio, at the moment.
All right. Thank you so much, Robert, for coming in.
Thank you.
Robert Omotunde, investment researcher at Afrinvest.